And looking at the past 4 years, we've seen lawsuits exchanged and turnover in leadership, and a lot of changes, particularly at the top of the Seattle Police Department. And so, Mr. Harrell, I want to hear from you. Is the Seattle Police Department succeeding today despite all of that? And what changes should be made in the future?
It is succeeding. Number one is, I have 14,000 employees. I had to make the decision to terminate a chief of police. I have now a superstar. He could work for any department in this country, and Chief Sean Barnes, who's a PhD, he's a Marine, he's smart, and he has a great command team. The fact of the matter is that when I became mayor, we had lost over 300 officers. And the repercussions from my opponent's defund movement cost us a lot of officers, cost us morale. So we've been rebuilding a system. Homicides are down over 40%. Shots fired are down. Serious crimes are down. Property crimes are down. We are trending in the right direction. But when you lose 1/5 of your department, we have 5 precincts. That's operating with 4 precincts. We didn't make any excuses. We started recruiting the right kinds of officers. And right now, under our leadership, we're getting 10 applications a day. We're getting 4,000 a year. This is the go-to place for good police officers. And we created from scratch the care department, who are responding to thousands of calls. We are a model for what good policing looks like. And because our use of force now is less than 1%, a national best, the Judge Robar terminated the consent decree. So we have a bright future in front of our officers. But yes, my opponent has never hired one employee. My opponent has no background in public safety, except arguing to defund it. So if you want to move forward with a great police department, the choice should be clear in this race.
I want to give Ms. Wilson a chance to respond, of course, but I wanted to follow up on the decision to fire the police chief that you mentioned, Adrian Diaz. You also hired him to begin with. Was that a mistake in the first place?
We have to understand, he was the chief when I was elected. Let's level set. He was the chief, and I worked with him as a colleague when he was on the department.
He was the interim chief, and then you gave him the permanent chief job.
And we did a national search. And of the national search, I was given 3 candidates. He was the best of the national search. And that's the decision that I made, and I own that decision. But the chief, based on investigations that were done, started making decisions that were unacceptable to me. And that's what a leader does. When you have actual hiring experience, you're not going to get it right all the time. I try to lead with compassion and empathy. So I made a decision to look for another chief. And look what we have, Chief Sean Barnes and his command staff. So we're moving forward. And that should be a good thing for the city, and we should be proud of that.
Ms. Wilson, I'd like you to respond to what Mr. Harrell said before, but also your assessment of where the police department is at today.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of work yet to do. So if you look at Seattle's crime trends compared to national trends over the mayor's term, we've had excess violent crime. We're also spending more than 2 times per officer than Boston, and that's not a difference in pay. That's our overall police budget. So there's a question of whether we're spending our money wisely. And the mayor's assessment of his decision to hire Diaz is not what I've heard, right? Diaz was hired over other qualified internal applicants. And the mayor stood by him for far too long while morale tanked and we lost good career, high-integrity officers. We're not doing community policing, and we're not following best practices on gun violence. That's the result of an audit that came out last year. And our mayor talked about high standards for our incoming officers. He worked with our council president, Sarah Nelson, to try to lower standards for officer hiring. So we have a long way to go, and that includes bargaining the police contract to make more progress on accountability. He mentioned the consent decree, but we still have a long way to go on police accountability. We have a 2017 accountability ordinance, major parts of which have still not been implemented because they were bargained away in the police contract. So no, we are not making the progress that we need to with our police department.
And Ms. Wilson, I wanted to follow up on Mr. Harrell's statement about your support for a budget proposal in 2020 that would have seen cuts to the police department of up to 50%. Can you speak to your support to that? And is that something that you still support? Where is your head today?
Yeah, I think I've been very clear in this campaign that I support a police department that is adequately staffed, that is responsive, and that is accountable to the communities that it served. In 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, we had a very contentious public conversation around the country about community safety and policing. I participated in that conversation, and also I have learned a lot since then. and I'm proud of what I've learned. I've been having a lot of conversations about public safety with former officers, with other people in the public safety space, and I'm very confident that we can make progress on these very difficult issues, and we can create a city that is safe for everyone.
So you aren't arguing that that is something you said 5 years ago. You have since learned a lot more, as you said. What changed your mind?
I think, the conversation back then, and honestly, we've made a lot of progress based on that conversation, right? The fact that we're having a conversation now about roles that police are playing that we don't actually need a sworn officer for, everything from crisis response to taking down reports of property crime, right? That conversation was really elevated at that time. And I think part of what that movement got wrong is that we thought, well, because half of calls don't need an armed response, maybe we only need half as many police officers. But the fact is that a police department has to respond to incredibly complicated situations, an active shooter situation, for example, right? We can't just scale down the size of the police department based on the calls that we think can be taken by alternative responders. So that's just one thing that I think was not well understood by that movement at that time.
Mr. Harrell, go ahead.
Sure. My opponent talked about we had discussions after George Floyd was murdered. We attended hundreds of discussions. We marched on the streets. I did not see my opponent at any of those discussions because had she been at the real discussions, we would have said, as in the black and brown community, our community would suffer the most if we defund. My opponent, in all due respect, doesn't know anything about public safety. She's holding up Boston as a model. The fact is Boston is smaller than Seattle. They have over 2,000 officers at Boston. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. I talk about a 1.9 to 1,000 ratio. My opponent will never commit to what adequate staffing means, as opposed to what? Inadequate staffing? So I'm glad my opponent has become enlightened, but someone should have said, wait a minute, our community will suffer the most without police officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. Let's talk about crime. While overall crime and 911 calls are down on 3rd Avenue and the Little Saigon neighborhood of Chinatown International District, those areas continue to have significant public safety issues like open-air drug use and violence. Many people who live and work in that neighborhood in those areas say not enough is being done. So what do you think has not worked in the city's approach, and what new strategies would you pursue to make these areas safer and restore public confidence? Ms. Wilson, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I've been doing community walks in a lot of neighborhoods around the city, including downtown with the Downtown Community Council, on Capitol Hill with business owners and property owners, and in the Chinatown International District. And it's true that we still have some real hot spots where there's drug activity, where there's other illicit activity. And one of the things that I've heard both from folks who live in the neighborhood and also from people who are on the street outreach teams, right? Because we do have a number of nonprofits that do outreach to people, trying to get them, services. And often the police are kind of MIA. And it's weird to be the one in this race saying this, but I really think that we need a more consistent police presence around some of these hotspots that can prevent them from forming in the first place. Because once you have 30 or 40 people on the sidewalk, doing whatever they're doing, non-police outreach teams can't really do very much. And so there's really, I feel like sometimes we take this all or nothing approach to policing, where it's either officers sitting in their patrol cars or we're arresting everyone and throwing them in jail, which we know that also doesn't work. So there needs to be more of this consistent on-the-ground presence where police are working with non-police responders, with stakeholders in the neighborhood, business owners, to take more of a problem-solving approach when there are problems in a particular neighborhood. So I think we can do a lot better using the police force that we have and the resources we have to address these problems more effectively. And also, this also is related to our response to the homelessness crisis, and we need to do better there too. Thank you.
Mr. Harrell, your answer to that question?
Sure. Well, I don't have to walk those areas. I'm from those areas, 3 generations from that area, 12th and Jackson as an example. You saw that we arrested 14 of the most prolific drug dealers there, and we seized $3 million worth of drugs, which is enough to kill Seattle twice. You see a very aggressive approach when we have to make arrests. But you also see a compassionate approach. People are killing themselves with fentanyl, which you could get for less than 50 cents. That is a health issue. And so if you look at under our administration, we tripled our investments in health strategies. We reduced fentanyl deaths by over 30% or so. So we will continue to double down on what we're doing, but the problem is we don't have anywhere to take them to get help. And we looked at the ecosystem. What we've developed is, you see the county passed the Crisis Care Center. That's a good thing. We invested in the STAR Center and the ORCA Center. So we're now investing in a place where we could take them to get treatment. So our calibration is the right calibration. And if you really study criminology and you look at the intersectionality between health and public safety, you can't use a public safety approach when people are dying on the streets. This takes time. You're talking about generational poverty, you're talking about generational discrimination. And so what we're doing is what we should be doing, helping each one, getting to know them by name. That is our approach. This is tough work. And again, having some of the budget challenges we're doing, we still figured out a way to triple our investments to save lives. Our fire department is the first one to administer buprenorphine to save lives. So we're setting a national model on what we should be doing in this space.
I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you can go out and with your own eyes see that what we're doing right now is not working. And, part of this, the mayor mentioned that the question is, where do you send someone? Is there treatment, right? But also the question is, where do they go after treatment? Because if someone goes to treatment and then they're back out on the street, they're just going to be engaging in the same behavior. So this goes back to our homelessness crisis, and it also goes back to funding for the LEAD program, law enforcement assisted diversion, right? And so, when someone is arrested, if we're going to divert them into a path where they're getting housing and shelter with services, because we know that just arresting someone, booking them into jail, and putting them back out on the street doesn't work, we actually need to be funding those programs where people are getting that long-term case management and help that we need, and that just has not been a priority of this administration.
Would you like to respond to that not being
Sure.
priority?
Once again, she's completely obliterating the facts. The founder of LEAD, Lisa Dugard, certainly supports my reelection. If you look at in 2022, we only invested $6.6 million. That was the budget I inherited. Under our leadership, we invested in 2025, $14.5 million, and this is the highest they've ever received. We also made sure that they were Trump-proofed in case they lose federal funds or some state funds, made sure we're supporting that approach. So we are modeling what you have to do on the softer approach, the upstream. One of the reasons why we put the education levy on the books and why we're doing so much in pre-K and childcare is because brain development between 0 and 4 affects them when they're in the life. A lot of these folks need help. So our investment strategy is aligned with best practices to get people the treatment that they need.